All right, thank you, Brian. Want to welcome our panelists here. We've got a very experienced crew. I think I added up the years, and we've got close to 25 years experience in mobile, just between the three of you guys. So start off with Sean. Sean Webster is the VP of Biz Dev at AppLovin. AppLovin is obviously the app monetization platform, and you guys also recently just released a game publishing platform as well.
Yeah,
great. So Sean's been with AppLovin for 4.5 years, 9 years total in the industry. He was at Flurry before that. Right next to him, we've got Andrew Gerhardt, VP of Publisher Platforms at InMobi. Andrew recently joined the team back in January through an acquisition. He was a co-founder and COO of AirServe. And Andrew is now focusing on rolling out the ad mediation and ad serving platform for InMobi globally. Then we have Ben Chen down here from Tapjoy. Ben has 9 years of experience. He's the SVP and GM of Developer Relations. He's made a career of doing business development and sales, really helping bridge mobile advertising and mobile gaming. So, as Brian mentioned, we're going to take a little bit of a stab at what the connected universe is looking like and how that's going to tie together with ad supply. So really interesting topic. Obviously, the name of it is monetizing the fridge. I haven't quite figured out how to monetize my fridge yet. That's usually where I just go to get my snacks. But coming off the panel with marketers talking about how they're connecting all the data into different outcomes, I think that this is a really relevant transition of topics because marketers are looking to your companies and your platforms to help bridge that supply. So let's just start off with the connected hardware, with mobile being the center of this connected hardware. Where do you guys see this? Where is this going? Are the publishers there to actually help bridge this? Is there enough demand in the connected home and in the connected universe?
Yeah, so I definitely think that there's always a lot of demand. Anytime there's new tech, there's a lot of buzz around it. We actually saw it. We launched the support to the Apple TV right around the time of the launch, and a lot of excitement, a lot of developers building into it actually even before they even knew if it was going to be an actual marketable ecosystem. We see that, I think, with basically anything, like even any sort of connected TVs. I think, the fridge. I don't know. I haven't necessarily heard anybody talk about the fridge, but it could happen. But I think the big thing that marketers want to see and want to know from us, or even developers want to know from us, is there supply? Is there a target audience that we can meet? And then another thing is, okay, is there that target audience that they can meet? Is there measurement for it? So can we actually track our return on investment, our return on ad spend, which is commonly talked about in mobile? So if you're looking at, an app developer on the Apple TV trying to drive an install, usually what they're going to be trying to back it into is, okay, well, how many sales did I get from that?
Yep.
What's my ARPDAU from the ads that I'm getting into it? And what we found with Apple TV, frankly, was we were just way too early. Yep. And I'm not saying it won't eventually catch up. I'm hopeful it will catch up, but from like a gaming performance marketing standpoint, it's going to take time to evolve.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it has to be the perfect blend and work for all parties. I mean, it has to work for the brand advertisers or performance advertisers. It has to work for the consumers, and the ad experiences can't be creepy in nature, right? So, I mean, there's been people that have the augmented reality glasses. There's the Alexa and the Echo Home and Dot. But if you had an ad that came through that might feel a little bit intrusive and creepy, right? And so that doesn't work for all parties in that way. You're starting to see scale in some markets like OTT and CTV because it engages and works well for, users are obviously adopting it, they're cutting the cord, it works for the brand advertisers, and so you have to find that perfect blend. But ultimately, I think the developers will follow. Whenever there's a platform that works and there's distribution, the developers will jump in and then it starts to take off. And we saw that obviously with the App Store.
Sure.
Yeah, I think from our standpoint, very similar to what Sean and Andrew said, is you've got to have audience, you've got to have measurement. But from our perspective at Tapjoy, we kind of look at everything is a bullseye, right? And kind of the center of the bullseye right now for us is mobile, and the intersection of mobile games and mobile advertising. So when we look at what's next, we kind of look at what are the rings that kind of go right outside the bullseye. And for us, as you kind of think about audience and measurement and what makes sense, we kind of look at it more in terms of evolution versus revolution, right? So I think jumping to the fridge is a pretty big step. And so we kind of think about a lot of things around esports and OTT because they're similar formats that marketers are familiar with due to past experiences, but we feel like there's a ton of upside and growth there because platform wars or content rights haven't been won yet in those spaces.
Yeah, so platform's really going to lead the developers, as you said, Sean, to actually build the content, and then marketers come in. Are you guys experiencing marketers coming in? They just want to hear, like, give us the most creative and most unique experience you can give us to acquire a new user. Do they come in with those expectations, and how are you guys like managing them to say like the supply just isn't there yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think it does happen. I think that actually happened with playables initially. Like, I think that's a huge topic in mobile right now. I mean, I think all of us are running playables right now as well. But I remember 2-3 years ago, there was a lot of excitement because the quality seemed high. It was let's be real, a lot sexier ad unit that you're playing another game on a game versus watching a 30-second non-skip video ad. There was a lot of interest in it, but there wasn't a lot of supply. Well, now, eventually, once the supply's there, look what's happening. It's catching off like wildfire. You're seeing all of us mobile ad networks there doing it. You're seeing new mobile ad platforms actually popping up and doing it as well. I think the same thing is going to be happening. Once there is that supply that can be hit, there's going to be more interest, and marketers will be there waiting in the wings.
I think there's always early adopters. I think the challenge is scale. You have some creatives or some marketers that come in and say, hey, we would love to do AR or VR, these 360 video units. The challenge is, okay, execution of that. Is there enough supply? Is there enough measurement? Can they actually execute? Is there technology behind it? And the infrastructure set up to execute that unit? Oftentimes, no. And so, yes, we can do it, but can you do it at the scale that they want in order to blow out their budget?
Right. We're going to hear later today from the platforms, too, like the technology platforms. That has to be there to be able to support all of this as well.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at, two buckets of advertisers, right? So there's the pure performance marketers who just want more conversions and more ROI against their spend, regardless of what the delivery mechanism is going to be. They want the output and the outcome. And then you've got brands who want something a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, right, and creative. And so, as Andrew mentioned, there's kind of the hype curve and then the reality and the disillusionment that comes with it. And I think right now probably a good example of that is AR. I think a lot of people are talking about AR. It looks really good. There's a lot of press releases about AR. But if you kind of look at the technical capabilities right now of AR, an SDK that supports AR is infinitely bigger than any SDK out there right now. And that's just going to curb publisher adoption until that gets solved. So it really kind of comes down to, what are the technical capabilities versus the pie in the sky ideas, and then how are you going to measure it?
Capabilities first, penetration second, and then you can actually deliver that scale, right? So you guys mentioned OTT, connected TVs, as a place that is starting to get more scale. What are the opportunities there? What are the challenges that are faced with OTT?
Yes, I mean, what we saw, I already kind of talked about it with, is just there wasn't scale, there wasn't, any sort of action that performance marketers could make with the way the platform is set up today. But obviously OTT is hot right now. It's, the whole idea of cord cutting, users want to view their content that way. It's growing like crazy. It's starting to get the scale from a just pure branding perspective. So, but then I think there's two things you got to solve with OTT and like marketing. One is it going to be owned and operated by the platform or the content provider? So, for instance, like Netflix is going to be all subscription. Marketers aren't going to be tapping into Netflix because it's owned and operated by Netflix. They're not opening it up. There's also, is it going to be a platform that's owned and operating it? Well, actually, if you look at Roku, is actually doing a very good job with their marketing actually on their device and on their platform, but it's closed. It's their own direct sales team, and even that, they're still trying to find the best ways to measure it, but the ad revenues are starting to catch up with the supply there. But yeah, I mean, I think it's going to definitely take time for performance to move in that way, and I think you kind of like have to figure out a way to partner with these platforms or even with the actual content provider if there's an actual play for a performance marketer. Branding, I think it's starting to catch up already, though.
Sure.
I mean, from a publisher's perspective, I think it's exciting times for OTT and CTV because that's where user consumption it's rising dramatically. And we're at a time now where demand and advertiser desire outpaces supply. And so there's an opportunity there for content providers or creators to come in with something exciting and capture eyeballs and then grow businesses. And so that's really exciting. But there's obviously a lot of things that need to be worked out in terms of the technology and the measurement and how we're going to target users and all those different things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge there too is that outside of this, the supply not being there, there's 3 different business models or multiple business models that are kind of happening, right? Some are subscription, some are ad-based, some are just kind of a la carte. You go buy the content and that's it. And so in the ones that do offer advertising, think Hulu or something like that, it looks a lot like the web when it first started, right? You kind of measure by the impression. You kind of have, the same ad showing over and over again. And until there's, I would say, until publishers or content owners recognize that the better user experience comes from a diversification of those ads and how to bring those ads in, and how do you do that versus having your own sales team versus working with outside platforms. I think all that has to kind of come together at some point.
It's mature, yeah.
It's just maturity.
Yeah.
It's just maturity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Andrew, from a mediation standpoint, that seems like a huge opportunity, right? Like, how do you get in there and actually deliver the content that's going to be the most relevant and the most profitable?
It goes back to what Ben was mentioning, really, just maturity, giving publishers the tools so that they can offer that diversification and provide the best advertising experience for their users. And so, yeah, I think it's exciting because it's not a very mature space. There's a lot of opportunity.
Sure. So we talked a little bit about the platforms, but focusing more back on the publisher. Do you guys have publishers coming to you just saying hey, I've got a new way that I can actually deliver this, deliver a brand message? Do you guys see that? And again, is it realistic and is the scale there to actually make it a performance model?
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to the Apple TV, there was a lot of buzz. Developers would actually come to us and ask us just to try to find out what was our background on it or our take on it. But sometimes with developers, they get kind of excited like brands do. They might get excited before there's actual viable platform. And we saw that. Actually during that time, I felt like half the actual developers that built into the platform were, frankly, just they were told that they'll get an Apple feature from the Apple App Store. So, I think it could be more strategic reasons than the actual impact that it's going to make at that time.
Yeah. So brand is really kind of leading this. It's easy. It's impression based. It's easy to measure. So that's where it's at.
Yeah. I would say a good example of this is again coming from the games publisher point of view. It's first there was Facebook, then there was Apple, and then obviously Android and Google, and then the next wave seemed to be let's do messenger games. Let's do HTML5, Facebook Messenger games. Let's get on Tencent. Let's get on all these different messaging apps that have scale. And so there's a lot of hype curve around that. Can we plug into that? Can you get ads against that? And it just really never met expectations. Sure. And so I think you always have that relationship that you're always trying to balance. And then I think the other side is realistically, on the publisher side, they're about yield optimization and how much can I optimize the inventory that I'm allotting to be monetized by ads, right? And so you'll hear every single publisher say, I'd much rather have brand versus performance. Yeah. And then we'll say, great. And then when they'll look at the eCPMs and they'll say, actually, I'd love to have performance back, right? And so there's always that fine line. It's we want it from an aesthetic standpoint, but realistically, when it comes down to crunching the numbers, performance just it just drives higher ROI because performance marketers are so sophisticated in their measurement.
Depending on the publisher and the inventory, yeah.
I think the
You're totally
sustained spend as well. That also, like, you'll see a lot more fill come from performance guys than the brand guys as well.
There's oftentimes a misalignment between publisher expectations and where the brands want to spend. We see that sometimes with native. Publishers will say, yeah, we want to take out all of our display units and put in native ads, and they do that, and fill rates plummet or the revenue plummets, and it's just not there.
Yeah.
Sure. And so oftentimes there's that misalignment.
So the call is out to the platforms, right? Like, let's make sure we can measure it so we can get performance in there, and that's actually going to expand out these different opportunities, right? Going back to the fridge, like, make that measurable, make ads be able to get delivered there. We were talking last night about the gas station where you see those branded videos where you're sitting there pumping gas for 3 minutes, and it's like, there's not even a call to action in there.
That's wasted ad spend.
Yeah, so like,
Exactly.
so consumer experience too, right? And I think, as Peter was talking about in the keynote, maybe not people-centric, but people-considerate, I think is the word that he used. What are the user expectations for ads as we move forward into new devices, and how that like bridges out from our mobile devices?
Yeah, I mean, I think looking at today's market with the mobile, just like the mobile ecosystem, or even just looking at gaming in more specific, you've seen a major trend. So right now, if you look at, I think I just checked this morning, the top 10 out of the top 15 game ads, or the game apps, are hyper casual. And if you guys aren't familiar with hyper casual, the thing about them is that it's a lot lower production, it's a lot easier to pick up, broad market appeal, and the biggest difference between them and any other game that's out there is that they primarily focus almost 99% of their revenue is coming back from ads. I don't think ads will ever be something that users will love or be super thrilled about, but I think with the retention on those games, it shows that it's easy to pick up, they'll love it. They'll be willing to watch it if they get the content for free. At the end of the day, they want content for free, and I think that's the biggest message. Obviously, there's going to be things that you have to think about with not burning them with too many ads or making the experience awful, but I think it's shown that basically any other platform moving forward, that if they're getting their content for free, that's the prime expectation from them.
Yeah. I think users' expectations are higher than ever. They don't want you to take their data. They want the content for free. They don't want to see ads unless they're, most of the time. They don't want display ads or intrusiveness. So there's a lot of responsibility on developers and marketers to integrate ads that are non-intrusive and conscious of all those different things. And so, I think their expectation levels are really, really high. I think in mobile, the introduction of rewarded video was a great step forward, right? You're going to show me an ad, but I clearly get something in exchange for that. And I think that there's other ways to introduce advertising that's non-intrusive and is a little bit better for the user experience. So I think we just have to keep those things in mind.
Yeah, it's really about enhancement and relevancy, right? So as Andrew just mentioned, rewarded video really kind of proved that the value exchange model worked, right? But you kind of think back to that took 5 years to get there, right? I remember talking to marketers 5 years ago, and they're like, why would I ever want something that is quote unquote incentivized, right? Now we've moved from like, oh, it's incentivized to it's rewarded because consumers have spoken and said within the environment that I'm in, that provides an additional value to my experience within the content. So we like that, right? And to the point where if you see games that now do not have rewarded video, if you look at the comments in the message boards for some of the core users, they'd say, wow, would be really great if there was rewarded video in here to help me kind of enhance my experience quicker in this game. So I think that's one side. And then kind of relevancy is, essentially a consumer wants the best, most relevant experience coming from their ads without giving up a ton of data, right? So it's kind of it's that catch-22.
Sure.
But some of that is also kind of overblown, right? I kind of go back to desktop and web blockers or ad blockers. Everyone was like, oh my God, ad blockers are going to crush the industry. It was a hot topic for a few months, and then it's slowly just kind of gone away now. And I don't think anyone's really thought or looked back on what the impact or what it is, because it seems like it's been minimal.
For sure. Yeah, so you said like relevancy. I think that convenience is a huge piece too, and that's something that mobile is like really helping us. It's like technology in our hand, in our pocket, that gives us convenience. And I think that's a trade-off that consumers are willing to make. And I just think about, my home, and I've got a couple of Amazon Dash buttons. Like that is like re-engagement at its finest. Like when I need new diapers, I don't need diapers. My son needs diapers. Let's get clear. Like I don't even have to think about it. It's like right next to the changing table. I just push it, and I think that is like where we're going to see advertising in the connected home is going to be attached to that convenience factor. And going back to the fridge, like you're almost out of ketchup or milk or something like that. Do you want me to order that on Amazon Fresh? So I think that it's relevancy. It's reward instead of incent. And then convenience is like another.
Yeah, if it improves your life, right? If it's providing value to you. If I saw an ad that reminds me of a concert for a band that I like I listen to Spotify, and so they'll send me newsletters or send me ads that tell me about concerts for bands that I've listened to, I have no problem with that.
Right.
It's great because it's providing value.
And that's the publisher and the marketer and the brands
working
together
right?
to give that consumer experience legitimacy, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Good. So, I mean, younger generations, not quite the diaper-wearing ages, but, like they are transforming the way that brands are marketing. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, too, is influencers, right? So brands are leaning on personalities to, like, deliver their point of view. How do you see that ties into mobile? How does that tie into what you guys are doing?
I mean, we saw it, especially last year. I mean, it was definitely really hot, specifically in the gaming vertical.
Yeah.
And we saw, it's still pretty hot too. I mean, I'm a big Seahawks football fan from being here.
Go Hawks.
And, go
I knew
Hawks.
I liked it.
Had to do it, sorry. But one of the things is you go on Twitter, you'll go see Richard Sherman talking about Fortnite. Come play me on Fortnite. It's like, and then you're seeing that with celebrities all over the place, athletes everywhere, and it's driving just tons, I think, growth for Fortnite. But then you're seeing that with hyper-casual as well, more of like the stuff that we deal with more in the day-to-day. Some of the biggest publishers, and actually in this initial move to hyper-casual about a year ago, a lot of their spend and a lot of their actual spend or just organic growth was coming from it as well. It might not have been at the time measured properly, but the growth was obviously there is very impactful.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, when you think about influencers or you think about the next generation, how do you engage with them? It's where are they spending their time, right? And I think, again, we come at this from a mobile games perspective, and I think we look a lot as influencers and platforms. It's really, you look at millennials or younger generations spending a ton of time on esports, right? And the influencers there are the broadcasters, right, that are sitting there on the streaming platforms on Twitch, and they're spending 20 hours a day talking about the game, showing the game. Users are consuming it left and right. And those are the ones that are building up huge followings. And so when you kind of look at kind of that next space, it's like, I think we talk about OTT, and I think we're talking about content in a traditional way. It's like, okay, here's a media content, here's what it is. But content also exists, especially video content, in streaming on those platforms, where anyone can kind of engage, build up a following, and become a broadcaster, right? And so, that is still a space that I think is very early but very measurable. There's a lot of data rights that have to be figured out there. There's a lot of platform versus content owners versus leagues versus whatever. But when you look at it from a marketer's perspective, or at least my personal view is, it looks so much like traditional sports. It's events, sponsorship, and marketing right now with natural extensions happening, kind of pulling in and out. That is just an area that's measurable, and the audience is there. It's projected to be a $70 billion industry within X, Y, and Z. And so the growth curve is there, and so that is kind of a space that I think is kind of in the crosshairs, happening very, very close to kind of mobile as the ecosystem in the center of the universe at this point.
I mean, I don't think it's anything new, right? It's just that, to your point, that's where the consumers are now, right? In the past, 20, 50 years ago, it was movies and television, and that's it, right? And now what these brands are finding out is, wow, there's tens or hundreds of millions of people watching this YouTube channel. How can we make the most of that? Not exploit it. How can we make the most of that, right? We can have product placement. They could be talking about our product or our service. And so it's really just following where the users are. And I think that ties back into monetizing the fridge. It's like, look, wherever the users are and wherever the brands can engage with them, they're going to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's moonshot it, right? So esports, it's evolving. It already has numbers and revenue that are mind-boggling, right? Where are your companies looking to innovate? Are you pushing the marketers, the platforms, and the publishers in different directions? Are you waiting to see what the platforms do first and foremost, and then react to that?
Yeah, I mean, AppLovin at least we're definitely still trying to, I mean, mobile is at the center of everything right now, as we kind of talked about. I mean, I think this year is supposed to be $70.3 billion in sales just on mobile this year. And so it's still growing. Right now, mostly we're tapping into just like the tier one markets. So I think AppLovin specifically is going to be looking at, global expansion. One thing he mentioned earlier is we have our own gaming studio now, so we could be building more content or helping developers build more content. And with that, I mean, that could be on mobile, or if the supply is there, the target audience is there, some of the measurements that we talked about in this panel is there, then we could always be nimble and make that move to, say, doing a VR game or building another go around at the Apple TV.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from the InMobi perspective, I think there's still a lot of work to be done in mobile. It's great to see that the mobile app environment has matured quite a bit, but there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of all the things we talked about, right? Delivering great brand and great advertising experiences within the apps. But some of the forward-facing things we're working on are really the OTT and CTV market. I think, looking 3 to 5 years out, that's a long time, and who knows what will change. But over the next 12 to 24 months, certainly the OTT and CTV space.
Yeah, in terms of mobile, I think we talk about mobile. Keep in mind the iTunes Store launched 10 years ago, right? And so now we're talking about it as if it's been established forever, but there were rough times within kind of getting to where we are today. And the reason we got where we are is because there was a hardware shift, right? Mm-hmm. That just was a massive penetration against consumers, so it grew a ton of industries. Right now, I think from our perspective, there's not another massive hardware shift coming anytime soon. So what you have to do is innovate within kind of the ecosystems that you are and find natural extensions. And so I think we kind of look at a little bit of everything. I think we're interested where platform wars aren't already won, where Facebook and Google haven't already taken massive shares, right? I think that's interesting to us. So we talked a little bit about esports. I mean, I think you can't have a panel without saying, we are definitely interested in cryptocurrency, but there's just so much that has to be kind of done there in terms of regulation. But again, if you look at 10 years when the App Store started to where we are now, that's a long time. And so I think you have to look at all the different vectors and see what actually materializes over time. But it all starts with the audience. Where's the audience, right?
Yeah. It will be interesting to see what crypto does in terms of like doing these microtransactions across our devices too. I think it's really interesting. So I completely agree. It's going to be evolution. There's not going to be a revolution. The hardware will be the thing that drives that, but I think that mobile will always be at the center of these experiences, right? Because it carries around our personal views and all the brands that we engage with and how we engage with them. Closing thoughts on hardware, software integration, AR, VR, OTT. Anything you guys want to add?
The one thing I'll say is just even though there's hardware advancements and evolutions, look, if you look up here, 2 of the 4 people have a smartwatch on, right? Like I imagine more than 50% of the audience probably has a smartwatch on. Mm-hmm. But that really hasn't taken off in terms of, I don't think, the advertising market. I don't think you can really engage with an ad that well within the watch, right? It's so tiny. So it has to be that perfect blend like we talked about, right? And that's where you see, sort of the smart televisions have that as well. So we'll see what comes in the next few years. Yeah,
as a consumer, I kind of had a realization after I had it. I was just like, not transformative, but it serves the watch serves a purpose and it's helpful. So it'll be interesting to see how the wearables kind of develop and how ad experiences and discovery come into that. Sean, do you have anything you want to
I think we covered most of it.
All right.
I think it's measurement, and then it's do you have a target audience to reach? And I think we'll eventually get there with some of these platforms, but I think right now we'll learn a lot and as much as we can from mobile.
Great.
Yeah, same as both these guys. I think for us, it's just like there's a ton of innovation and growth still left within the ecosystem itself. And I think it's about really kind of mining and being really, really smart about how to develop that basically is a win for the publisher, the advertiser, and the consumer. When you get those three things, things generally scale and work really, really well.
Yeah, that harmony is starting to happen,
Yeah.
I think, so great. Well, thank you guys so much. It was great having you guys and being able to moderate this panel.
Thanks for
All
having
right,
us.
thanks.
All right, thanks guys.